The Kenai River Lodge sat nestled against the braided curves of the Kenai River, a humble scattering of weathered log cabins wrapped in mist and spruce. Each summer, tourists filtered in, fishermen with coolers, honeymooners snapping photos. At dawn, retired couples looking for one last wild memory. But when September arrived and the fireweed turned red, the guests thinned, the bears fattened, the clouds sank, and the mountains closed in. On the morning of September 12th, 2022, Brenda Riley carried her clipboard through light drizzle, her steps practiced on the gravel path slicked with wet pine needles. She was dressed in fleece and rubber boots, too. Decades of Alaskan hospitality carved into her expression, patient, blunt, skeptical. Cabin 7 was the last on her checkout list. Young couple, Tessa Sullivan and Finn Hoffman, had booked it for a week. Oregon plates. First-timers. Friendly, polite, eager. They were supposed to leave by noon. Brenda didn't like late checkouts. She hated no-shows even more. The gravel parking spot outside Cabin 7 was empty, but the key hadn't been returned. She knocked. "Tessa, Finn!" Silence. Just the soft hush of rain in the trees and the distant rush of the Kenai. She knocked again, louder. Waited. Brenda fished out her master key and unlocked the cabin. Inside, everything was still. A guidebook, Sibley Birds of the Pacific. Northwest lay open on the table beside a folded coffee receipt from Anchorage, a half-drunk mug of cocoa. A woman's jacket on the chair. The bathroom, 2 toothbrushes rested side by side and a cup by the sink. Shampoo cap open. Suitcases. Still packed, 1 blue, 1 black. Cell phone charger plugged into the wall. Only the people were gone, in their rental car. Brenda stared at the scene for a long time, her instincts slowly turning from irritation to unease. Hikers miss checkouts all the time, but they didn't leave their luggage. They didn't leave toothbrushes and half-read books and perfectly packed bags. She gave them 2 more hours. Then she tried the cell number on the reservation, straight to voicemail by that evening. She called the Alaska State Troopers. Sergeant Miles Corian had been stationed in the Kenai Peninsula for most of his career. He'd seen snowstorms swallow, roads moose crash through kitchen windows, and a man freeze to death on a 3-mile hike with a granola bar still in his hand. Didn't panic easily. He listened carefully as Brenda relayed the story. Then he made 2 calls, one to Tessa's parents in Portland, one to Finn's brother in Eugene. The last anyone had heard from them was a cheerful text Finn sent the morning of September 9th, heading to Slaughter Gulch Trail today. Looks epic. Should be back at the lodge by dinner. They never came back. That's when the search began. Slaughter Gulch Trail wasn't for casual hikers. It was steep, remote, unforgiving. But the parking lot at the trailhead, a dirt patch surrounded by thick spruce and birch, didn't contain their rental car. The gray Ford Escape was missing. It made no sense. Missing hikers leave their cars. They park, disappear, and are found days later under a pile of branches or half submerged in a ravine. But this was different. A trooper helicopter scanned. The area troopers hiked in 2 miles on foot, no footprints, no dropped water bottles, no sign they'd ever stepped on the trail that night. The bulletin went out. Missing, Tessa Sullivan, 27, and Finn Hoffman, 28. Last seen September 9th. Believed to be hiking Slaughter Gulch Trail. Gray Ford Escape, a K rental. By day 3, the lodge was surrounded by parked cars, tents, and ATVs. State troopers, SAR teams, volunteers, dogs. The command center was set up in Cooper Landing's community hall. Coffee pots never stopped brewing. Maps were taped across every wall, sectioned off with red grid lines, but the search led nowhere. No footprints, no gear, no car, nothing. In desperation, they sent troopers to gas stations, trailheads, fishing camps. 8 days in, a possible sighting emerged from an old gas station 60 miles south. Walter. The owner insisted he'd seen a couple matching their description, asking about back roads to the coast. They bought coffee, a map, had an SUV. I think it was gray. Surveillance footage was useless. corrupted beyond recovery. The lead went nowhere. By October, sleet lashed the slopes, and searchers trudged through mud thick with rot. Swelled and froze. Trees dropped their leaves. The snow line crept lower. Volunteers left. Helicopters stopped flying. And Sergeant Corian, his eyes hollowed out from weeks without sleep, gave the order to suspend the search. It wasn't called off. Just indefinitely paused. Brenda Riley kept Cabin 7 empty all winter. 9 months passed, and then came. June 5, 2023. Park Ranger Elias Vance had been inspecting bait stations for black bear season in the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge. Station KB-117 was deep in the woods, forgotten sliver of permitted land tangled in underbrush and game trails. He never made it to the barrel at first. What he found, what stopped him in his tracks, was the smell. Rotting sugar, molded fruit, putrid mix of yeast and meat. A blue plastic barrel lay on its side in a mossy clearing. Its contents spilled into a swarming mass of donuts, jelly, pastries, corn feed, and something else. A pair of black hiking boots. Legs, a body. Vance didn't touch it. He backed out, called it in, waited 40 minutes in silence while the flies buzzed louder than the birds. When Sergeant Corian arrived and saw the scene, something in him clenched, not just at the body, but at the boots. He recognized them. They were Finn's. What followed was a flood. Forensics. Helicopters, lab reports, autopsies. Finn Hoffman had not died of exposure. He hadn't been attacked by a bear. He'd been struck hard, blunt force trauma to the back of the head, and he hadn't been dead for 9 months, 2 weeks, maybe 3. The rest of the time, his body had been frozen, stored, preserved, then dumped. Alongside a grotesque pile of bear bait in a blue seafood barrel from a fish plant that had gone. Bankrupt a decade earlier, the case was no longer a disappearance. It was homicide. And one question rang louder than any others. Where was Tessa Sullivan? The blue barrel was loaded onto a flatbed and flown by helicopter to Anchorage under armed guard. It had become more than a container. It was now a forensic time capsule. Evidence of premeditation, concealment, and something colder, stranger. In Sergeant Miles Corian's long career, he had never seen a murder staged with such grotesque calculation. Corpse surrounded by rotting pastries. A human body hidden in bait. The state medical examiner confirmed the identification. Through dental records, the victim was 28-year-old Finn Hoffman. But it was the cause and timing of death that rewrote everything. Finn had been killed by a single, deliberate blow to the back of the skull. No signs of struggle, no defense wounds, no accident. And he hadn't been dead for 9 months. The examiner was clear. Decomposition pointed to a death within the past few weeks, which meant someone had stored his body, reserved it through an Alaskan winter, then dumped it here. In the wild, among corn feed and jelly donuts, to be found, to be eaten? Nobody knew yet, but Sergeant Corian's mind burned with questions. Where was Finn kept all winter? Why dispose of the body now? What did it mean? And above all, where was Tessa Sullivan? A new OPERA, the command center in Cooper Landing, reopened. This time under a new banner? Homicide investigation. Gone were the hopeful yellow signs and missing posters. In their place were maps, digital forensics logs, and subpoenas. What was once a desperate wilderness search had become a criminal investigation with evidence, suspects, and timelines. Finn's phone had never been recovered. Neither had Tessa's. But the discovery of Finn's body reignited the media storm. National networks replayed old footage from the early days of the disappearance. Photos of Tessa and Finn smiling at Crater Lake, of Tessa mid-laugh on a hike. In the Cascades, flooded the internet once more, and this time, new narratives spread like wildfire. Missing Oregon couple found murdered. Speculation exploded online. Reddit threads, TikToks, amateur sleuths. And then came the inevitable turn. Whispers about Tessa. Was she a victim or something else? Had there been a fight? Or was she hiding? Had she done it? Corian hated this part of investigations. The public's need to explain the inexplicable by making monsters out of survivors. But he couldn't ignore the possibility in any suspicious death. Partner is always considered, even when she might be a hostage, even when she might be dead. The bait site. If a bait site where Finn's body was discovered was legally registered as KB117, a designated black bear baiting station issued by Alaska.
Best fishing game.
Rangers tracked the permit back to a name, Silas Croft. Age 58. A hunting guide based outside. Odo Tenna. Croft had a reputation. Hard-edged, solitary, known to bend the rules. Minor citations over the years: untagged bear, illegal bait quantities, expired guide license, nothing violent. But enough to warrant attention. 2 troopers brought him in for questioning. He arrived with a scowl and an air of irritated confidence. Wearing a frayed camo jacket and boots stained with grease and blood, his story was short. Yes, he held the KB-117 permit. No, he hadn't used the site in over a year. And no, he had no idea about any body in a barrel. People piggyback, he muttered. You set up a bait spot, get the scent going. Next thing you know, some other yahoos dumping donuts there like it's a damn bakery. Happens all the time. He didn't have a solid alibi for late May, the likely window when the body was dumped. I live alone. Work on my truck, drink beer, fix gear. No one checks my calendar. They searched his truck and cabin, nothing. No blood, no cleaning products, no receipts, no direct connection to Tessa or Finn. Not even a barrel matching the one found. Croft remained on the list, not cleared, but not charged. Still, Corian couldn't shake the feeling. Croft could navigate the backcountry. Croft did have access to bait sites. And Croft did know how to keep things quiet, but the pastry pile changed everything. A new lead. The DONUTS, the crime lab, examined the bait pile in microscopic detail. Most of it was feed corn and bulk-bought baked goods, indistinct, untraceable. But one item stood out: a raspberry-filled, sugar-dusted pastry square. The lab confirmed it was not from a grocery chain or big-box supplier. It came from a commercial bakery in Anchorage, Glacier Bakeworks, a distributor that serviced gas stations and small-town stores across the Kenai Peninsula. It was a lead court in sent 2 of his best investigators to Glacier Bakeworks. They pored through logs of deliveries, invoices, surplus orders. They tracked dozens of shops, clerks, stores, from Homer to Sterling. What they were looking for: any bulk order of those specific pastries or better. Any theft. They found it. A convenience store in Moose Pass, barely more than a shack with a diesel pump and a broken soda machine, had logged a theft on May 28th. Someone had broken into the rear freezer and stolen boxes of pastries. Only pastries. Nothing else. The clerk remembered the incident. Thought it was a drunk bear. But now, it had to be connected. The barrel was dumped around May 30th. The location of the store: 40 miles from the bait pile. It wasn't definitive, but it was movement. Direction. The BAR are back in Anchorage lab. Techs focused on the barrel itself. It was a faded blue seafood drum, industrial grade, with an inventory stamp partially scraped off. Using UV light, they reconstructed part of it. Kostoloff Seafoods lot number 22. A Kostoloff had gone bankrupt in 2011. A liquidation auction followed. Hundreds of barrels and equipment sold to dozens of buyers. It was a thin thread, but Corian asked. For the auction records, it took a week to track them down. One name jumped out. Alistair Finch purchased 3 pallets of surplus seafood, drums at the 2011 auction. No address listed. Payment made in cash, but a cross-check with land records revealed something more interesting. An undeveloped 120-acre parcel of private land near the southern shore of Tustamina Lake, remote, forested, no structures on satellite maps, owned by Alistair Finch, the LA Catchula 10/2023. 2 brothers from Anchorage were fishing at a secluded cove on the southern shore of Tustamina Lake. They had reached the spot by a TV, guided by a topographic map, and a tip from a bush pilot as they prepared their boat. One of them spotted a glint beneath the water, a roofline, metal. They peered into the crystal-clear lake, sunlight cutting deep, an SUV, upside down resting. Like a ghost beneath the surface, they called it in. Corian's heart pounded when he heard the report. The location was 30 miles from the bait site, and far, far off, the couple's stated hiking route. Divers recovered the vehicle, a gray Ford Escape. Rental tags intact inside. Everything was waterlogged, decayed. The car had sat at the bottom of the lake for months, but the GPS unit had been preserved. It was removed, dried, and rushed to the State Digital Forensics Lab. The technicians retrieved a partial travel log. On the morning of September 9, 2022, the vehicle had not gone to Slaughter Gulch. Instead, it had veered off onto logging roads near the lake. The final GPS ping came from the same cove where it was found. They had driven there, voluntarily. Before they vanished, the proper Corian now had two anchors, the barrel and the lake, and one name linked to both Alistair Finch. He dug deeper. Finch was 68, no criminal record. Moved to Alaska 2 decades ago after a tragedy. A car accident had taken his wife and child. He paid for everything in cash. He lived off-grid. Locals knew him barely. He bought canned goods and tools. Spoke little. Rumors swirled. Traps on his land. Reclusiveness. Silence. But what mattered now was this. He had bought the type of barrel used to dump Finn. He owned land adjacent to the lake where the couple's car was found, and he had the skills to hide and survive. Corian drafted the affidavit. The judge signed the warrant. A raid was planned for dawn. The CABI on July 15, 2023. 6 troopers moved quietly through the woods. Their rifles slung low, boots soundless on moss. Finch's land was dense, untouched, no trails, no clearings. Then they found it, a small cabin, nearly invisible, deep in the trees. No movement, no sound. They approached. Corian called out, "Alaska State Troopers, Mr. Finch, come out." Silence. They breached. Inside, Finch sat at a wooden table, holding a coffee mug. Calm, waiting. He said nothing. But behind the cabin, in a locked storage shed, they found a chest freezer. Clean, recently scrubbed, luminol sprayed inside, lit up. Blue dot blood. And then, in a padlocked storage compartment, they found a small, turquoise hiking pack. Inside, Tessa Sullivan's wallet. Her ID, her face, silent. Finch watched them, and then finally he spoke. "I told her not to run," he said, "but she ran anyway." Alistair Finch's voice was dry and low, as though the words had been buried beneath years of silence and were being exhumed one syllable at a time. Sergeant Corian stood in the dim cabin, the turquoise backpack on the table between them. Its fabric stained, edges frayed. Finch looked at it for a long time. He didn't reach for it. He didn't cry. His face barely shifted, but his breath changed, shallow, irregular. "Tell me what happened," Corian said, his tone careful, controlled. Not demanding. Not threatening. Just steady. Measured. Finch looked up. "You won't believe me? Try me." He stared past Corian, through the grime-frosted window, toward the trees beyond. "They got stuck," he said. "Muddy road." September 9th. Late. Afternoon. Heard the engine first. I went to check like I always do. Rifle in hand. Just in case. And Finch's jaw moved side to side, like he was chewing something too tough to swallow. "They asked for help. Finn the man got angry when I told them to leave. Didn't like my tone. Stepped toward me. Didn't mean to kill him. I reacted." Corian didn't blink. "You hit him. The rifle stock. Back of the head. One blow. And Tessa." He hesitated. She screamed. Lost her mind. I panicked. Didn't know what to do. So I took her back to the cabin. Locked her in? Why? Finch shrugged, then winced. A gesture filled with something not quite guilt and not quite regret. because I didn't know what else to do. I figured winter would come. Maybe I don't know, let her go in the spring. He swallowed. I didn't hurt her. Not like that. I fed her, let her out during the day. She hated me. Spat on the floor. But I didn't touch her. Didn't want to? And the car drove it to the lake. Let it roll in. Watched it sink. Why the barrel? The donuts. I thought maybe the bears would take care of it. A pause stretched between them. Corian leaned forward. Where is Tessa now? Finch's eyes narrowed. She ran. Slipped out one morning when I was chopping wood. Mid-May, I searched. Called her name, but she was gone. The forest, it's big. Corian stared at him. Did you kill her? No. Did she die on your land? I don't know. Corian stepped outside. Hey. The air was thick with the scent of pine, old smoke, and rot. He radioed for backup, issued orders to begin a full property search. But deep inside, a pit had opened. If Tessa had escaped alone, starving, without gear, where would she go? In which direction? And how far would she make it? The search RSTARTS this time, the operation was targeted. They drew a 5-mile radius around the cabin and divided it into grid squares. They brought in cadaver dogs, drones, trackers, anthropologists. Every ravine, thicket, and muskeg pit was cataloged, and each day they didn't find Tessa. The tension grew thicker. Finch was transferred to Anchorage under suicide watch, charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. His court-appointed attorney filed no motions, requested no bail. Finch seemed resigned, as if prison were simply another kind of cabin in the woods. Meanwhile, the media firestorm reignited. The public's imagination latched on to Tessa Sullivan, a woman kept alive for months in a madman's cabin, a prisoner in a quiet hell, and then vanished again into the cold green wilderness. #Where's Tessa? That trended for days. Candlelight vigils were held in Portland and Eugene, and in Cooper Landing. The searchers trudged deeper into the terrain that had swallowed her. The Satchel T. Arn. August 3rd, a dog team flagged a scent near a steep, heavily forested ravine about 4 miles northeast of Finch's cabin. Under a fallen spruce, half obscured by brush and moss, searchers found accrued lintu branches woven between tree roots, floor padded with dried lichen. Inside, scraps of clothing. A berry-stained handkerchief. A water bottle wrapped in fleece and bones. Human, tiny, weathered. Scattered. A forensic anthropologist confirmed the remains were female, adult, consistent with Tessa's size. Dental records sealed it. It was her. They pieced it together from the shelter, the condition of the bones. In biological evidence nearby, she had survived for several days, maybe even a week. No shoes, no pack, no food beyond foraged berries and insects. And in the end, it wasn't violence that claimed her. It was exposure, hypothermia, and the slow shutdown of a body betrayed by fear, cold, and hunger. Tessa Sullivan had escaped the cabin, but not the forest. AFTA and Matha Sergeant Corian sat alone. In the lodge office, where it all began, flipping through the case folder, it was now complete, officially closed. Tessa Sullivan, deceased. Finn Hoffman, murdered. Alistair Finch, convicted life without parole. But for the families, there would never be peace. The final weeks of Finn's life, the blow, the freezer, the disposal, haunted his parents. The long winter of Tessa's captivity, followed by her desperate, fatal flight into the forest, haunted her sister. In the courtroom, Finch gave no final statement, just stared ahead, unmoved. As the judge read the sentence, he left behind a cabin that would rot into the earth, a freezer that would be cut up and hauled out in pieces, and 120 acres of wilderness now forever haunted by 2 young souls who wandered in, searching for beauty, and found a nightmare instead. Outside the courthouse, a reporter asked Corian what he'd remember most about the case. He looked down at the photo in his hand, Finn and Tessa, smiling on a sunlit trail. He said nothing, just folded the photo and walked away. The courtroom had emptied. Finch was gone, transported under heavy escort to the Anchorage Correctional Complex. The judge's words still echoed in the wood-paneled silence. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. A sentence designed to bury the man in stone and steel. But even with the case closed, the story wasn't over. Not for those left behind. Not for the town of Cooper Landing. Not for Sergeant Miles Corian, who couldn't sleep without hearing the buzz of flies. Above that blue barrel, and not for Tessa Sullivan's sister, Erin, who arrived in Alaska 2 weeks after the sentencing. Holding a small duffel and a folded map covered in her own red markings. "I need to see it," she told Corian. "All of it." He hesitated. "You won't want to," he said. "I already don't want to," she replied, "but I need to." The return to the CABIN, they drove in a convoy of 2 Corian in his trooper SUV, Erin in a borrowed pickup. It took them over 3 hours on rugged roads, no GPS dared map. The forest thickened the further they went, birch and spruce tightening, like a jaw. Erin Sullivan wasn't what Corian expected. Not fragile, not theatrical. She was precise, thin, and silent. Her eyes were stormy gray, her hair cropped short like a soldier's. She didn't speak until they reached the edge of Finch's land. Where was the car found again? 30 miles south, bottom of a glacial lake. Took weeks to get it out. She nodded. And the barrel. Northwest, near a registered bear bait site, 29 miles from the lake. Erin pulled out her map and drew a rough triangle. "And the cabin is here." "Dead center," Corian said. Erin tapped the page hard. "This isn't wilderness, it's design." Inside the ROINS, the cabin had been abandoned since the raid. Now in late summer, it sagged under mildew, the smell of rot and silence heavy in the air. Flies returned to the window panes. The freezer had been removed, but a square on the floor remained, a stain that even the scrubbers couldn't lift. Erin stepped inside. She said nothing, just walked, noted, listened. This was her prison, she asked after a while. Corian nodded. "She lived here. How long?" 8 months, give or take. Erin ran her fingers over a strip of wall where wood had been scratched, shallow, chaotic, like fingernails. She didn't speak, but her breath trembled. "She survived," Corian said. "Longer than anyone thought possible." "She didn't just survive," Erin whispered. "She planned. She waited. She escaped." Corian nodded again. "She ran through snow in May, without shoes." A long pause. "I would have died in a week," Erin said. The JOU RNL'd that night. Back at the trooper post, Corian opened a manila envelope labeled Evidence Personal Effects. Sullivan T. inside were Tessa's belongings recovered from the shelter site. Fragments of clothing, a hair tie, and a small notebook with a damp-stained cover. They hadn't been able to read it before. Most of the pages were blurred, ink running like tears. But Erin took it, flipped through, and stopped. She wrote in code. Corian raised an eyebrow. "What kind of code?" Erin turned the notebook toward him. She was obsessed with cryptograms as a kid. "We made secret alphabets when we were 10. She kept a diary in them. She tapped a page where a series of letters repeated in odd patterns. GWTZ MZGVV, WMLN, KZGG, SVWLIG. "It's a simple substitution cipher," she said. "Mirror alphabet. A becomes Z, B becomes Y, and so on." Corian watched as she scribbled on a notepad the translation, "This I know, none are the same." Another page. K, R, M, T, R, M, Lu, GSV, GLFG, RMT, ZM, HR, MT. She translated panel in of the closet, an answer. Her eyes went wide. "Did you search the cabin's closet?" she asked. Corian nodded. "Of course. Twice. Did you take the paneling off?" He didn't answer. The P&L the next morning, they returned to the cabin. Erin led the way this time, moving faster than Corian thought possible through wet undergrowth and downed limbs. Inside the closet in the cabin's only bedroom, she ran her fingers along the wooden slats. "There," she said, "the 6th board. Newer." She pressed it inward. It shifted with a soft pop. Behind the board was a small void, barely larger than a shoebox. Inside, a piece of cloth, folded tightly, wrapped around a metal flash drive. Corian's stomach dropped. He pulled on gloves. What the hell? They drove back to the station in silence. The VideCO, the flash drive, contained 3 video files, each roughly 20 minutes long. No timestamps. No sound beyond wind and breath. The first opened to the dim interior of the cabin. Tessa sat in the corner, back to the wall, thin, pale, bruised. She looked at the camera directly. Then she began to speak, silently, mouthing words. Her lips moved with controlled precision. Aaron watched, then suddenly sat forward. She's spelling, she whispered. ASL, alphabet. Fingerspelling every word. They transcribed it together, playing the video over and over until the message came through. It was a testimony, a full account, her abduction, her captivity, Finch's behavior, and the truth. Corian's hand tightened around the pen. Finch had lied. He hadn't just struck Finn once. He had lured them in. He had flattened their tires with a homemade spike strip. He had invited them inside. He drugged their coffee. Finn never stood a chance. And Tessa. He kept her locked up from the very beginning, only letting her out, under watch, only feeding her if she obeyed. He had tried to break her. He had almost succeeded. The second video was her escape plan, a recorded whisper of maps, routes, timing. She had memorized his routine, his blind spots, his weakest days. He had trained herself in secret, moving silently, breathing shallowly. She knew she had only one chance. The third video was for Aaron. If this is found, Tessa had mouthed, I didn't go down quiet. I want you to know that. She smiled at the camera, just once, and then it ended. The FALOUTITHA videos were entered into official evidence. Finch was brought back into court for resentencing under amended charges, now including premeditated murder and criminal entrapment. His legal team had no defense. The new evidence was released to the families only, by request. The public never saw the third video that belonged to Aaron, and she never shared it. She left Alaska quietly, scattering a portion of Tessa's ashes by the Kenai River. Another portion she took home. Some part of her, she told Corian before leaving, should go somewhere warm. The LEGA said why that fall. The state passed new legislation mandating stricter tracking of abandoned private land. Mandatory reporting for off-grid homesteads within 20 miles of a disappearance, and the creation of a new wilderness forensic task force. The case of Tessa Sullivan and Finn Hoffman became required reading in police training academies across Alaska, and on a quiet plaque just outside the Cooper Landing Community Hall, a memorial was placed. No quotes, no explanations, just 2 names. Tessa Sullivan, Finn Hoffman, 1995 to 2022. They didn't get lost. They were taken. The first snow arrived early that year, by the end of September. The peaks above Cooper Landing were already capped in white, and a thin sheen of frost rimmed the river in the mornings. The town slowed, emptied, braced for the long winter. Tourists were gone. The cabins stood dark. Only a few locals remained, the ones who understood that in Alaska, silence wasn't peace. It was memory. Sergeant Miles Corian sat in his office at the trooper post, blinds half drawn, staring at a photograph. Tessa and Finn both grinning, windswept, the mountains behind them bleeding light. The image had once been hopeful. Now, it was an artifact, part of the case file, laminated grief. He didn't know why he couldn't put it away. The case was solved. The killer was serving life. The bodies had been found, buried, mourned, and yet something still clawed at him. He flipped through the post-closure documents, the autopsy, the GPS logs, the handwritten notes from Tessa's hidden journal, the freeze-dried rage of Alistair Finch's confession, each piece slotted into place like a jigsaw puzzle whose final image was unbearable. A story of cruelty, randomness, survival, and ultimately, failure, but still, something was missing. The topography of Laskorian spread. Out the same topographic map Aaron Sullivan had used, a grid of creeks, elevation lines, ridge lines, logging roads. On it were 3 pins, the bait barrel where Finn had been dumped, the sunken SUV at the bottom of Tustamina Lake, the cabin, dead center between them. But now Corian added a 4th point, the location of Tessa's shelter. The ravine northeast of Finch's cabin, where she'd huddled beneath the roots of a toppled spruce. Alone and freezing, he connected the 4 points. A diamond. It was eerily symmetrical. 2. Symmetrical. He frowned. Tessa hadn't run toward town. She hadn't run toward roads. She had run deeper, east, into the worst terrain, the thickest, the most unforgiving. Why? Had she simply gotten turned around? Or was there something else? He pulled her journal back out, the warped, coded notebook. Passage caught his eye. It dismissed it before as nonsense. It's paranoia, perhaps. Starvation-induced hallucination? But now, underfloor, other padlock. Not his lock. The padlock, not his. The cabin returned Scorian returned alone. No media. No Aaron. No warrant. He hadn't turned the site over yet. Technically, it was still evidence. The cabin was beginning to collapse in places. Moss clung to the corners of the roof. Fungus bloomed beneath the windows. But inside, the floorboards remained intact. Cold. Quiet. He moved to the far corner near the stove, where the boards dipped slightly underfoot. He knelt, ran his fingers along the cracks. There, just beneath a layer of dust, a screw slightly. Misaligned, he pried the board up. Beneath was a metal trapdoor, more than 3 feet wide, locked, but not with Finch's usual lock style. Not the rusted latches used elsewhere. This was newer. Industrial, as if installed after the cabin was built. And unlike the others, it didn't have a simple keyhole. It had a numeric keypad. Corian stared. A keypad in a hermit's cabin. She stowed. Slowly, backed away. Heart ticking louder, he called anchorage. The CHMBER, the forensic team, arrived 2 days later, along with a locksmith and a federal agent. They pried the trapdoor open using a bore scope and a hydraulic lift. What they found was not a root cellar. It was a room, underground, insulated with thick foam padding, lined with plywood, windows. No furniture beyond a cot and a bolted-down metal cabinet. There were surveillance monitors stacked in the corner. Wires strung through crude plastic tubing led to a generator, system long since dead. On the wall, photos of other people, other hikers, other couples, taken from a distance, from trails, campsites, parking lots. There were more than a dozen faces pinned in a grid. Some were crossed out, others circled. None of them were Tessa or Finn. They were from before. Files were recovered, notes, logs written in Finch's rigid handwriting. He had been watching people for years, not just living in the woods, hunting in them, and worse, they found items. A necklace, backpack, a trail permit with the name scratched out. None of it matched. Tessa or Finn? Corian's stomach clenched. These weren't trophies, they were breadcrumbs. Victims never linked, never found, or never searched for. The darker Church Finch wasn't a recluse who had snapped one day. He had been doing this for longer. Maybe not every year. Maybe not often, but enough. Enough to fill a wall with pictures. Enough to build a room. Enough to lure 2 young hikers onto a road to nowhere. A routine he had likely rehearsed before the barrel, the bait, the freezer. They weren't improvised. They were part of a pattern, a calculated system of abduction, concealment, and disposal. And all this time, they had thought Tessa and Finn were the beginning. They were the end. Reopened fields with this new discovery. The case exploded into national headlines again. FBI teams flew in. Cold cases from across Alaska were re-examined. Missing person reports from as far back as 2005 were reopened. Dozens of files once ruled misadventure were quietly pulled from archives. What if the woman who slipped to a gorge in 2010 never slipped? What if the backpacker whose tent was found by a river in 2014 didn't drown? What if the man who disappeared from a trailhead in 2018 never even made it to the trail? The press began calling Finch the hunter of Kenai. Erin Sullivan refused to speak to reporters. She did, however, publish Tessa's journal, coded. Pages and all, with a foreword that simply read, "She knew what she saw. She knew what he was." She ran so he couldn't do it again. The legacy expanse of Federal Task Force Operation Tustamina was created. Specialized wilderness investigators began combing areas near Finch's property and other remote parcels he may have accessed. 4 more shallow graves were found within the next year. All, Gannett confirmed, all never identified before. Finch was never charged with those deaths. He stopped talking after his original sentencing, refused all interviews. His prison cell remained dark, silent, and watched. But the damage was done. He was no longer a footnote in a tragedy. He was a chapter in a long way. Hidden history of violence. The reason she ran EAST Tessa's final mistake wasn't a mistake at all. She hadn't run away from town. She'd run toward that buried chamber. She knew it was there, or suspected. Her journal hinted at an underside. The other trap. She ran toward it. Maybe to destroy it. Maybe to expose him. She didn't make it, but she led them to it. Full. 1 year to the day after Finn and Tessa's disappearance, Sergeant Corian stood at the mouth of the trapdoor. The cabin would be demolished the next day. The underground room collapsed and filled with concrete. He held the laminated photo again. The one he kept in his desk. He whispered into the wind. "You didn't just survive? You stopped him." Then he turned, walked back through the trees, and left the ghosts behind. The demolition of the cabin happened at dawn. A single excavator arrived on a flatbed truck, its long arm painted yellow, streaked with frost. The operator was a man named Wade Murdoch, born and raised in Soldotna, who'd torn down old trapper shacks, fire-ravaged lodges, even the abandoned bunkers from Cold War drills. But nothing like this. He waited in silence as the state troopers walked the perimeter one last time, and Sergeant Corian gave the nod. The cabin came down in 6 slow minutes, the walls buckling inward, the roof shattering like a brittle shell. The trapdoor and everything beneath it, the padded cell, the viewing monitors, the twisted ritual of surveillance collapsed with a sighing groan of timber and memory. Then came the trucks of quickset concrete. Within the hour, the entire footprint of Alistair Finch's hidden world was buried under 4 feet of cement. They planted no marker, only a GPS. Pin recorded in law enforcement databases and on Erin Sullivan's private map. A week later, the quiet didn't last. On October 9th, exactly 13 months after Finn and Tessa disappeared, the FBI's Anchorage field office received an envelope. No return address. Postmarked in Girdwood, Alaska, inside a burned CD in a clear plastic sleeve. A single typed sentence on a slip of paper. "I know about the others. You missed some." Corian was called in that night. The CD contained 6 images, all grainy, low-light, trail camera photos. Different people, different locations. Each appeared to be taken mid-hike or from behind a tree line, or as the subject stepped out of a tent or a vehicle. The timestamp spanned for years. Some photos showed individuals known to investigators, victims whose remains were discovered near Finch's land, but 2 were new, unknown hikers, still unaccounted for. Who sent it? They reviewed every log. No known associates of Finch. No record of anyone visiting him in prison. No matches to DNA or fingerprints on the envelope or disc. The Girdwood postmark gave them a 2-hour radius. But the security cameras at that small town post office had been inoperable for months. The sender vanished like smoke. Was it someone else involved? A copycat, or had Finch confided in someone, an accomplice? The idea sent a cold pulse through every agent and trooper on the case. A cold case nitrogen low in GR with the 2 unidentified subjects from the trail cam photos. The task force expanded again. Their faces were published in missing persons databases and quietly circulated to parks, departments, and trail associations throughout Alaska, Washington, and British Columbia. A ranger in Tok, Alaska recognized one, a solo hiker who'd visited a primitive trail in 2017 and was reported missing a week later. Her name, Rissa Elwood. Age 33, her case had been ruled likely misadventure due to signs of a possible fall near a ravine. But no body was ever recovered. The second was harder. A man in his late 20s, no name, no known missing report. Investigators circulated the image through facial recognition systems and border databases. Finally, partial match. Jason Renner, a drifter last seen in Calgary in 2019, backpacker. No. Close family. No cell phone. His disappearance had never been reported. Now he was another ghost in Finch's orbit. But the question lingered. Who took the photos? Finch had been arrested in July 2023. These two images were time-stamped after his arrest. Someone else had access to his cameras. The possibility of a NETWRK for the first time. Investigators considered a possibility they had long resisted. Finch wasn't a lone predator. He was a nucleus, a silent, isolated node in a web that may have extended farther. Hikers, watching hikers. Isolated men passing tools and methods like a whispered secret. It sounded like fiction, paranoia. But now there was a CD in an anonymous envelope, and faces they had missed. The task force pivoted. They began backtracking all equipment used at Finch's property, not just the bait barrel, also the trail cams, the wiring, the camera mounts. Several brands were traced back to purchases made at a single outdoor store in Anchorage. One invoice stood out: March 2018, name used, Eric Rance, paid in cash. They ran the name. A fake, but a phone number had been used to reserve a GPS unit that was never picked up, CORRI, in order to subpoena. The burner phone, long deactivated, pinged once in 2018, near a trailhead north of Homer, then silence until now. Return to the beginning. Corian returned to the Kenai River Lodge, where this had all begun 13 months prior. Cabin 7 was still used, now freshly renovated, bearing no sign of the trauma that once hovered inside it like stale air. Brenda Riley, lodge manager, met him with tired eyes and a pot of coffee. Thought this was over, she said. So did I. They sat in the dining hall. Guests laughed outside by the river. Children played in the snowmelt. It felt like a different world. Did Finch ever stay here? Corian asked. Even once? Even under another name? Brenda hesitated. Never that I know of, she said. But the week after Tessa and Finn vanished, a man checked in for one night. Cabin 9. Quiet. Didn't want towels. Paid cash. You remember his name? Don't need to. He left his license behind. I boxed it. Never mailed it. Walked to the back office. Returned with a small cardboard container filled with keys, sunglasses, and other forgotten items. She handed him the license. Corian's fingers froze. The photo was recent. The name, E. Rance, same alias from the trail cam equipment. The man from the envelope, the second Helmonter. Suddenly, the trail was new again, fresh and alive. Finch had have acted alone in his crimes, but someone had studied his methods, shadowed his timeline, perhaps idolized him, resented him, and now with the investigation tearing down Finch's legacy, this second man had surfaced, not in person, but in signal, a CD, a name, a reminder. You missed some, and perhaps might. Still out here? The reawakened fair Corian stood on the porch of Cabin 7 as snow began to fall. He thought of Tessa, of Finn, of the others, of the room beneath the cabin. Of the symmetry in the map? Predators didn't just exist in the wilderness. They used the wilderness, bent it to their shape, and even when one was caught buried under concrete, caged in steel, another emerged, quiet, watchful, waiting back. At the Anchorage field office, a bulletin was issued. Be advised, new person of interest in the Finch case. Name, Eric Rance alias. Caution, likely armed. Approach with care. And so it began again. Another search, another shadow, another hunter. In the trees, the manhunt for the unknown figure known only as Eric Rance began without fanfare. No press conferences, no flashing banners, no public warning, because what the FBI and Alaska state troopers now believed quietly, grimly, was that this was not just a matter of a single person who admired Alistair Finch. This was the echo of Finch, and perhaps the echo was louder than the original scream. The BASKTRI Eltha Anchorage field office built a profile. The man who called himself Eric Rance had been organized enough to purchase surveillance equipment in 2018, cautious enough to use cash, and clever enough to use a phone once, just once, to register GPS gear he never collected. His trail intersected Finch's in subtle ways. Fishing license registered to Eric Rance had been filed in 2019. The same month, Finch bought new baiting permits under his own name. A campsite reservation in Denali under the same alias placed him 90 miles from a hiker's disappearance in 2020. He had checked into the Kenai River Lodge one night after Tessa and Finn were declared missing, staying in cabin 9, visible from the porch of cabin 7. There were no fingerprints, no facial matches in any federal system, but the handwriting on the lodge registry, strong, upright, tidy, matched the envelope sent to the FBI. He wanted to be seen, but only enough to stay in front. The signal in the TRESN, November 2023, snowfall layered the Kenai like ash. A team of troopers hiking near the ravine where Tessa's shelter had been discovered found something strange. A wooden post buried deep in moss and snow, set at an angle against a tree trunk. On it, a small, laminated sign. Nothing on the front, but the back was etched with coordinates, latitude and longitude burned into the wood. With a soldering iron, they traced it to a spot 30 miles southeast, across rugged backcountry. Terrain. Aerial recon showed no structures, no fire rings, just trees, but something glinted on the footage. A metal canister suspended from a branch. They sent a drone. Inside the canister, another note, sealed in plastic, typed on weatherproof paper. It read, "You're walking the wrong direction. Look east of the freezer. It's still there, still waiting." The return to the ruined Scorian returned with a forensics team. The concrete slab that had sealed Finch's hidden room had already begun to crack along one corner, likely due to frost heave, tree root growth, or improper settling. Corian stood. On the edge. East, he turned. 50 yards into the trees, brush choked the forest floor. Deadfall everywhere. They had searched it before. But not with this context. They used metal detectors. An hour passed, then a ping, buried under 6 inches of earth and moss, a small iron hatch, covered in camouflage netting and branches. It was old, rusted, not part of Finch's original cabin. Footprint. They pried it open below, a ladder descending into a narrow pit. No lights, no sounds. CORRIN descended first. The second ROM, the smell hit first. Antiseptic. Mold, iron. The room was no bigger than a shipping container. Walls of insulated paneling. Cot. A shelf of empty cans and water jugs. Got. A mirror bolted to the E. Ceiling angled toward the floor, and in the center, a single wooden chair with leather restraints. They found bloodstains. Not recent, faded, mixed with fragments of cloth fibers, human hair. But there were no bodies, no bones, no dates, no names, just a ritualistic emptiness. A void carved in silence and control. Whoever had used this space had abandoned it. But not long ago, the cold preserved too much. On the shelf beneath the cans, they found a journal, spiral-bound, scrawled handwriting, neat and symmetrical, page. After page of observations, subject approached trailhead with camera at 8:43 a.m. Couple appeared unprepared. No bear spray. Ill-advised clothing. Test failed. They turned back after half a mile. No interest in isolation. It was hunting notes, reflections on potential victims. Judgments, selections, rejections. One page chilled Corian the most. The girl fought harder than expected, screamed too long, learned not to repeat. The page was undated. No name, but they all knew who it meant. Tessa, the nightmare Fia Cinch wasn't. T just a solitary killer. He was a mentor, a signal tower in the wilderness, calling out to others like him, men drawn to control, silence, and ritual. The underground lair wasn't just a tool. It was a message, a proving ground, a demonstration. And now, whoever Eric Rance was, he had stepped into that vacuum. But unlike Finch, he wasn't hiding in one place. He was moving. The FOATH weeks. Later, FBI cyber forensics uncovered footage on a seized hard drive recovered from Finch's cabin. In the files were dozens of time-stamped videos, trail cam feeds, internal surveillance, even hidden GoPro style. Captures mounted in trees along trails. Most were labeled by date and discarded, but 4 were marked with strange labels. Sequence 5, Test Sequence 6, Selection Sequence 7, Execution Sequence 8. Discard 1 file showed Finn and Tessa approaching their SUV the day they disappeared. Unaware they were being watched from a low angle. Camera embedded in a tree. Another days later showed Finn's body being hauled in a tarp. It's partially frozen toward the bait station. But the person in the footage wasn't Finch. The posture. The frame. The gait different. Younger. This wasn't just evidence. This was collaboration. Finch hadn't always worked. Alone there had been another at least once, perhaps always, and now. Only he remained. The RLSATON. The Cooper Landing Command Post. The board went up again for the 3rd time. But this time were 2 faces. Alistair Finch, deceased by incarceration, unknown male, Eric Rance. Large their crimes overlapped, their methods mirrored, but their philosophies seemed to diverge. Finch had hoarded his solitude. This new man, he wanted the world to know he existed. He had left notes, coordinates, clues. He was hunting with witnesses. The end of the BGIN in the winter. Aaron Sullivan received a package in Portland, no return address. Inside, a hiking patch with a bear claw insignia, the same one from Tessa's backpack. A photo, faded, printed on thick paper. Tessa and Finn caught mid-laugh on a trail, likely taken by someone unseen, and a post-it note. She was braver than he realized. The game isn't over, Aaron called Corian that night. Her voice was steady, controlled. But at the end of the call, she said one thing that haunted him long after. He didn't just steal her life, she whispered. He's trying to keep her spirit. Twist it into a trophy, make her his legend. Corian knew she was right. This wasn't just a killer, it was a chronicler. A hunter who wanted a story, and the world had given him one. But Corian made a vow that night, quietly, no audience. He would end it, even if it meant walking back into the woods, even if it meant not coming back. February 2024. The Kenai was frozen solid.
Ow.
Snowbanks over 4 feet high rimmed the highways. Ice fog clung to the valleys like a curse. For most of Alaska, this time of year meant endurance, waiting for the thaw, waiting for the sun to stay. Up a little longer, for things buried to rise again. For Sergeant Miles Corian, it meant something else. A deadline. The pressure a momentous the FBI wanted. Results the media after the reemergence of the so-called Eric Rance. Notes it stoked public paranoia with titles like The Apprentice of the Woods, The Kenai Copycat. Is the next Finch already watching you? Social media ran with it. Reddit theories spread daily. Internet sleuths geo-triangulated sightings from Anchorage to Juneau, though most were nonsense. Some people, Corian believed, simply wanted to be hunted. They romanticized it, the same way others had with Finch. Before the truth was known, only Aaron Sullivan understood, and she refused to speak publicly. We don't feed it,
Ow.
she told Corian in a phone call. We end it. The clue in the PHOTOGR, the photo sent, to arena shot of Tessa and Finn laughing on a trail was not one the family had taken. It was from the outside. From a distance, captured on film, but a careful enhancement of the upper left corner revealed something strange. A reflection, a polished surface. Rounded, maybe a thermos cap, maybe binocular glass. It showed a figure, partially obscured, leaning against a tree, camera in hand. The reflection was faint, but real. A location expert working with the FBI cross-referenced the surrounding vegetation, tree-line curvature, and elevation in the background. They narrowed it down to Hidden Ridge Trail, a rarely used route 12 miles outside of Hope, Alaska. Finn and Tessa had never listed it on their itinerary. So how had they gotten there? Or better, who led them there? The Traveler Road, the GPS unit from their SUV, recovered from the lake, had only recorded a partial log from the day of their disappearance. But what if there was another GPS trail? Corian pulled phone records, though. Both Finn and Tessa's phones were missing. A record from Finn's Google account had been partially cached the morning of September 9. A map route suggestion. A waypoint labeled Hidden Ridge Rest Stop. It had been shared to his phone from a burner, his email. The account no longer existed, but it had directed them there before. They ever drove off the main road, that route would have taken them along backlogging trails, through a bottleneck where cell reception dropped. Through isolation, right where Finch had placed his spike trap. But if it hadn't been Finch, then who? The route data had come from someone already watching Rance. The return to Hidden Ridge Corian took only two with him: FBI agent Callie Warren and Ranger Elias Vance, the same man who'd found the blue barrel 9 months earlier. They left their vehicles at a small turnout and continued on foot. Miles to the RIDGELINE. Warren carried a drone kit and ground-penetrating radar. Vance had his service weapon and years of wilderness instinct: Corian. He carried Tessa's journal in his coat pocket. Near mile 7, the trail vanished. Trees thinned, wind picked up. Then a scent. Burned wood. They found the first clearing. Just past a rock outcrop, a collapsed fire pit, cold and covered in snow. Scattered beer cans, empty shotgun shells. But it was the second clearing that mattered. The SIT Warren spotted it first, barely a shimmer in the white. A loop of monofilament lines stretched low between two trees. TRIPWIRE. It had snapped under the weight of the last snow, but the placement was deliberate. Beyond it, a trap camera, partially hidden in a hollowed stump, its lens cracked but intact. They carefully extracted it, sealed it in evidence bags. Then they found the perch, a raised platform, man-made, 15 feet up, nestled in the crook of an old pine, accessible only by climbing or ladder. Up top, a waterproof bag containing energy bars, a journal, a burner phone with its battery removed, and on the side wall, etched into the wood, "You still think this ends with me? ERTHEJOURNAUR. A. Longlake." Finch's obsessive clinical notes. This one was stream dash of dash consciousness, a hunter's inner monologue. One entry read, "I watched them die twice, once in the woods, once on the news." Neither version got it right. Another. Finch only played with isolation. I understand it. To take a person's name is one thing, but to take their silence, that's the real act. And most chillingly, there are others, not like me, but willing. And willing is enough. The IMPLICATIO and the task force returned to Anchorage with a new understanding. Rance wasn't emulating Finch. He was competing with him. And more than that, he was recruiting others, scattered through. The journal recoded references phrases resembling screen names, call signs, or signal identifiers. Echonorth, Pine Ghost, Dust Track. It's all written beside coordinates or dates. Could they be people? Was there an online community? Or were they simply figments of a disturbed mind? Corian wasn't sure, but they weren't ruling anything out. The VIDO's Warren decrypted the burner phone. It contained only 3 files. Each was under 30 seconds. The first, APOV video descending the same ladder into Finch's original underground room before it was filled with concrete. The second, footage of a woman identified hiking alone, recorded from behind a stand of alders. The third, the interior of a different hidden room, lit only by flashlight. A voice whispers off camera, "You got the wrong man. You think you solved it. But he just built the door." The STR and internally, agencies began fracturing. Some believed Rance was bluffing a glorified edgelord, a scavenger feeding off Finch's legacy. Others believed he was something worse, a seed, a man who didn't just kill but planted the idea of killing. Corian kept thinking about the symmetry of the original map, the bait pile, the cabin, the SUV, the shelter. Now the diamond had extended eastward too. Hidden Ridge, it wasn't a pattern anymore. It was a circuit. The lieutenant's WR9G. In March 2024, an anonymous message was left on the tip line, voice disguised. Routed through a foreign server, "You're looking in the wrong woods. He doesn't need Alaska. He only needed the myth. That's the door you opened. You should have sealed it." The call ended, but the damage was done. Finch's crimes had become legend. His cabin, even demolished, still drew thrill-seekers and true crime YouTubers who posted drone flyovers, clicked flashlights into the dirt, whispered into myths. They were feeding the myth. They were watering the seed, and Rance was watching. The final. Journal PAG on, the last page of Rance's Ridgetop journal, a rough sketch, a winding trail, and one word. Written in capital letters, smeared, as if by a gloved thumb returning. No date, no time, just the promise of a loop. The hunt wasn't over. It had barely begun. Spring arrived late in Alaska. By Medapro, the snow hadn't yet surrendered the deepest trails. The rivers surged with meltwater. Ice cracked and groaned along the edges of remote lakes. And across the backcountry, a subtle change began to unfold footprints. Where there had been none, birdsong returning to hollowed forests. And something more elusive: movement. The task force was restless. Worn thin, too many false sightings, too many online hoaxes, too many wannabes inserting themselves into a case that no longer belonged solely to the authorities. It belonged to the world now, but Sergeant Miles Corian remained focused on the only thing that mattered. Eric Rance was real, and he was not done. The dust track. Mushtu Reunade. From the list of code words found in Rance's journal, unearth, Pine Ghost, dust track, only one had been paired with an actual GPS coordinate. The others were too vague. But dust track pointed to a location just outside Wrangell-Sant. Elias National Park. A no man's land. A jagged borderland of brushy muskeg, failed homesteads, and washed-out mining roads. Corian, an FBI agent. Warren flew to Copper Center and met up with park ranger Sadie Lang, who had served in that region for over a decade. When they showed her the coordinate, she squinted. "That's old logging country," she said. "No maintained trails. Closest thing is the Slagline Service Road, and even that's impassable after the thaw." "Ever heard of anyone using the name Dust Track?" Warren asked. Lang hesitated. "Then yeah. Once a few years ago, guy came through, asking about back access to Nebesna. Said he was writing a book about abandoned cabins. Wanted to know if anyone had lived off-grid north of the glacier." "Name?" Corian asked. "Didn't give one. Paid cash. Had a scar under his left eye. Didn't blink much." The cabin in the Misty. It took 2 days of hiking to reach the dust track coordinate. There, buried in fog and silence, they found it, a small, hand-built structure. Just one room, sloped roof, no windows. The door was padlocked shut. They entered. Inside, the smell was different from the Finch cabin, not rot. Something worse: preservation. The walls were covered in mylar insulation, light-proofed and layered. With thick thermal padding in the center, a cot, a propane stove, a shelf of canned food. But the real horror was on the west wall. Dozens of photographs, Polaroids, film stills, drawings. Each one featured a different person. Most were alone. All were candid. Some were clearly unaware they were being photographed. They counted 47 in total. At the bottom of each, a short label. Too old, too paranoid. Perfect hands, trusts easily. Rejected looked back. The journal, volume 2, another notebook was found under the cot. Unlike the first, this one was typed and printed, its pages sealed in plastic sleeves. Inside, field notes, tactics, recruitment experiments. Corian read one entry 3 times before. Saying anything? Econorth was unstable, obsessed with noise. Severed ties, pine ghost, still useful. Follows orders. But I don't think they understand the why yet. They only like the how. Warren looked up from her own reading. He's building something, not just killings. A framework, a cult. Corian asked. No, she said. A playbook. Recruitment. THURY in D.C., a behavioral analyst named Dr. Lacey Catt joined the task force. She had studied similar patterns in online radicalization. Her analysis was simple and chilling. Rance is not creating copycats, she said. He's creating disciples. She showed a slide, an online forum that had recently gone offline, but archives had been captured. The name, the quiet trailhead posts discussed surveillance techniques, off-grid living, GPS dead zones, rural hunting, strategies. But what unsettled the analysts most was the tone. It wasn't edgy or angry. It was devotional, worshipful. A post from Dust Track read, Finch showed us how to break them, but Ranch shows us how to preserve the silence. Another user responded, if you make them vanish cleanly, the world writes the story you choose. The missing GIR, lat the same time, a new case hit Anchorage headlines. Mira Dean, 19, had vanished while hiking near the Harding ice field. Solo trek experienced, fit, left a journal in her car, saying she needed silence. Her last ping was near Exit Glacier Trailhead. Her phone was never found, but park staff did report something strange. 2 days before Mira disappeared, a man in his 30s had asked about secluded trails. Said he was writing an article on glacial erosion. No name. When shown a facial composite from the Dust Track witness encounter, the ranger nodded. That's him, the eyes. Corian flew there the next morning. The cave Sir Chandraskew had already swept the area and found nothing. But Corian retraced the edges of the glacier knot, the main trail, the fringes where no one went. After 3 hours, he found what he wasn't expecting, a set of stacked stones, clearly arranged to draw attention, but only to someone trained to look for markers. He followed them. They led to a crevasse, and inside a shallow cave at the back, burned coals, empty food wrappers. A woman's parka, no body, no sign of struggle, but scratched into the ice. He wants you to follow, but not all paths come back. -M.D. It was Mira's handwriting. Attached to her journals. She had been there, and she had escaped somehow. Somewhere. The exit INTRVIW that night. Back in Seward, Corian received a call from Anchorage Dispatch. A woman had checked into a small clinic there with frostbite, minor exposure, and a concussion. No ID, but when asked her name, she said, "Tell Sergeant Corian." Mira made it out. Drove through the night. When he arrived, she was asleep, for in her arm. Heart monitor steady, but when she woke, she only said one thing before slipping back into sedation. There's another one. He's not the last. April 28, 2024, Anchorage. Alaska. When Mira Dean finally stabilized, the FBI cleared the room and left Sergeant Corian alone with her. She looked older than 19, gaunt, sunburned, dark crescents under her eyes. Her voice was hoarse from days of exposure, but her eyes were sharp. Alert. I ran, she whispered. I don't even know how far. But he didn't follow me. Corian sat beside her, notepad closed. Start from the beginning. Mira didn't hesitate. The encounters met him near Exit Glacier, just before sunset. She thought he was another solo hiker. He was polite, soft-spoken, said his name was Nick, asked if she'd seen mountain goat tracks. She didn't think much of it until she woke that night. In her tent, to the sound of something brushing the fabric when she unzipped. The door, no one was there, but her bear spray was gone. The next morning, she found fresh footprints circling her site, at loops. No other hikers had been nearby. She kept moving deeper into the backcountry, toward the ice field. She wanted isolation, but suddenly, isolation didn't feel spiritual anymore. It felt like a trap. By the third day, she saw him again at a distance. Watching, just inside the tree line, she never saw him blink. The trap he struck at dusk, knocked her unconscious as she tried to break camp. She woke in a small shelter. It's carved into ice and rock knot, unlike the ravine where Tessa had hidden years ago. He hadn't tied her up, he hadn't spoken, but on the walls were pictures hers, taken from behind over the course of the week. "You know why I chose you?" he asked her once. She didn't answer. "I almost didn't," he said. "You're too smart, but smart ones understand the silence." It didn't hurt her. Not physically, but the stillness he forced on her, the weight of it was worse. And then, on the third night, he vanished. She waited until sunrise. Then she ran and kept running. 3 days later, she stumbled onto a ranger outpost near Bear Glacier. She had covered over 30 miles. The message left. Behind fee teams returned to the icefield cave the following week. It was empty, but inside, scratched. In soot across the ice wall, "You let her go. Not because you care, but because you want a witness." And beneath it, "Not all legends need a body count. Some only need a story." It was no longer just about death. It was about myth-making, and Rance had figured out how to keep his alive. A global AWAKNING. The media descended again. The Kenai ghost, the glacier phantom. They had a new victim, but no clear resolution. Mira refused all interviews. She quietly moved to the lower 48, location unknown. The task force never released her cave photos to the press. But what they couldn't stop was the internet. Forums, podcasts, dark web threads, all sparked with one question: who was Eric Rance? And another, more dangerous one: was he the only one? Because embedded in the cave beneath the soot, hidden by glare until forensic teams used thermal cameras, was a list. Barely visible, 10 names, some confirmed dead, some missing, some not yet reported. One entry near the bottom circled twice: Echo North, July done. The FBI believed it was a kill list or a contact log. Either way, it confirmed there. Fear. This was bigger than one man. The legacy of FINCH at the heart of it all, still, was Alistair Finch. His crimes had been monstrous, but they now looked like the prototype Rance had taken Finch's blueprints and evolved them. He wasn't just abducting victims, he was managing a network, mentoring, corresponding, possibly even directing from the shadows. And as the trail went colder again, task force made a quiet decision. They reclassified the case from serial homicide to organized non-state actor. In effect, they weren't hunting a killer anymore. They were hunting a cell. The final journal, a third notebook, was recovered. 6 weeks later, from a mailbox in Kenai, no return address inside, 40 pages of dense coded text. But the last page was written plainly, handwritten in neat black pen. You can concrete the cabin, you can bury the barrel, you can burn the journal and freeze the trail. But I'll still be here. I am what lives in the space between names. In the split second, someone disappears. I am what they see when they realize no one is coming. Finch built the chamber, I built the silence, and you built the story. ERPOSTSCR. Peter, the story of Finn and Tessa, became a documentary, then a series, then a podcast that topped global charts for months, but the end was never written, because it hadn't come. There were no final arrests, no faces matched to Rance, no body recovered, only a ripple of cold, spreading awareness that in the vast silence of Alaska and beyond, someone was still walking those old trails, leaving no tracks, taking only names and giving none back.